Good morning, ladies and gents. It's Nick at Optima PS. Thanks once again for coming back to my channel. I really do appreciate you all being here. I am really grateful for the support, so thanks once again for that. Today I wanted to jump on. We've got a lot more optimism in the markets than we have had for the last couple of weeks, which is always great to see, of course. Um, you know me, I don't particularly let emotions get in the way of any of my tradings or any of my investment choices when it comes to this market, this sector being crypto or anything else, to be honest with you. But I know that the world does, and it's nice to see a little bit more optimism out there. You can see here, these are the transactions going on right now. This is XRP and fiat based or XRP and stablecoin based transactions. There's certainly a lot more going on at the moment than there has been in recent times, which is good. It points us in the right direction. Whether or not we see a great movement in the immediate future, I'm not so sure, but I suspect so. If we take a look here, we can see this is today's markets. Everything is a little bit more optimistic than it has been the last few days, isn't it? 1 week turnaround on Bitcoin, 9.38%, up about 2% in the last 24 hours. Ethereum, 5, up about 2.6. Dropping down, Solana up about 6.5%, 3.5 in the last day. XRP doing what XRP does best, lagging behind the rest of the market. But still, we've seen 4.5% over the last week. We're ever so slightly down in the last 24 hours, but we're picking up again at the moment. Sitting at 58.55 cents. I would like to see that push on through the 60-cent mark by early next week. I think it probably will. But in the same respect, there's an awful lot going on in the market. So there's going to be a lot of people taking profits and movement, dropping us down as often as there are people moving in. It's just the way the world goes. I don't get disappointed by it. I don't get dismayed by it. We just watch it move on. As long as you have faith in the project, you can see we're going in the right direction. And that's a little bit what I wanted to talk about today, because all this optimism is out there is great, and then I start to see people going too much the other way, going, "Oh my God, we're gonna see this price hit $10,000 a coin in the next month." We're not. Unfortunately, we're not. I don't want to be the misery guts. I don't want to be the guy that is always doom and gloom, but we're simply not. In a different case, I don't believe all these doom and gloom merchants who talk about market cap being the major restrictor. I don't think there is a major cap to the price of XRP in the grand scheme of things, but it takes time. And I wanted to talk about that, the speed of adoption, the time it takes to adopt into these markets, so that you can have a good idea as to where I think the utility side will go. Now, before we get any further on that, just remember utility isn't what I mean by retail growth. There is a retail bull market approaching us, and I expect to see XRP make a very handsome profit. But I don't expect to see these numbers that people are talking about from the retail market in the immediate future. The guys that are talking triple digits, $100, $500, that famous $589 XRP, I just don't see it soon. But that doesn't mean you won't make remarkably nice profits. The difference with XRP over some of the other retail coins, especially some of the meme coins, is I think it will make remarkably good profits this time and won't necessarily see the same amount of retail bear disruption when the world pulls out again. Because I think the utility will begin to take shape between now and the next bull run, which means we should see banks, big institutions, large investors at least beginning to adopt XRP. And the reason I say it in that cautious tone is they certainly won't go all in. They won't dive in with trillions of dollars like people expect anytime soon. But in the same respect, they may well move in with smaller amounts to test the water, to get some on file. You know, these guys don't need to be buying XRP for 50 cents like me. I needed this bear market. I needed to fill my bags with nice cheap XRP because I don't have a balance sheet with trillions of dollars on. These guys can go in and buy at whatever rate they like because they know they're going to make the profits to their business operation, whether they buy XRP at 50 cents, $5, $50, or 500. It's going to be a fundamentally important move for them as time goes by. I often refer back to sports franchises. I'm a soccer guy, depending on whatever sport you use, but it's all the same thing. In soccer, football, as we call it in the UK, you get players begin. We don't have things like the draft. Players tend to be brought through by the clubs in what they call a youth system, And a lot of the smaller clubs will bring young players through who emerge as a first team player earlier because they're playing at a low level. And at that particular time, a small club, let's say in League Two, may have a player that is worth £500,000 today, €500,000 today. And one of the big clubs might look at him and go, we like this guy. But rather than pay £500,000, euros, whatever the number might be for a guy, thinking he may eventually go on to be worth 50 million, they'll allow another team further up the ladder than his current side, but lower down the ladder than they are to buy him for, let's say, €500,000. And he gets tested at a higher level. Then another team might come in and pick him up for €5 million a year or two later. And that might test him at the very top level. And when he proves at that point he's going to be good enough at the top level, then a team like Man City, Man United, Chelsea, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, they'll come in and pay the big bucks. People often go, but why didn't they just buy him down at the bottom for €500,000? And the simple answer is they didn't need to. They didn't need to take that gamble. They could let somebody else trade him, coach him, feed him, blood him into the team, get him to the point that he's about to be the next big thing, and then buy him. Because they don't need to get the bargain 500,000. The difference between 500,000 and 5 million or 25 million to those clubs is, it's a month's income. They don't need it. And that's where we find, or that's where I see this market is similar. I don't think JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley need to be buying XRP at 50 cents. I don't think they care about the difference between 50 cents and $5, 50 cents and $50. I don't think they care. For the amount of savings they'll make, they can afford to let this thing prove what it's going to be first before they jump in. So I think it will be a while. And I wanted to explain that in a way that I think best fits the storyline, if you like. So what I'm going to do, before I jump in, as ever, I'm a little bit late with my normal disclaimer. I'm a financial advisor by now, but I'm absolutely not yours. So anything I say or do in this video should not be taken as financial advice, nor legal advice for that matter. It's just a bloke sharing his opinion on the internet, sharing off a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of experience, in the hope that you bring some value, or I bring some value to you. So let's crack on with this. And so what I wanted to do, just before we crack on, Fear and Greed is at 48, so we're just about bang in the middle, which is up from the last couple of days, which is very nice. I wanted to look at online banking as the best, or the closest story I can think of to the adoption of cryptocurrencies, at least from a major global utility point of view, as opposed to just the retail traders trying to make a quick buck. Now, online banking, this is just a Wikipedia page, and it goes on to online banking. You can tell by the language it uses that this is quite an old one. Online banking, also known as internet banking, virtual banking, web banking, or home banking, is a system that enables customers of a bank or other financial institution to conduct a range of transactions through their financial institution's website or mobile app. Since the early 2000s, this has become the most common way that customers access their bank accounts. So this is what I wanted to look at. Since the early 2000s, it's become the most common way. But if you look at the early history, the precursor to the modern online banking services was distance banking electronically and by telephone since the early 1980s. The term online became popular in the late 1980s and referred to the use of a terminal, keyboard, and TV or monitor to access the banking system using a phone line. It sounds such dinosaur words now, doesn't it? It sounds like we're going back to the 1920s, not the 1980s. For those of you who don't know, I was born in 1981. So this is, about my era. I saw the birth and the global emergence of the internet. I remember the days when no one had the internet at home. I remember I didn't even have a computer as a kid. I think we got our first ever computer was a Commodore Spectrum Plus 3, where you put in an old deck tape, and it took about 25 minutes to load up, and you got some really, really, really basic games. But moving on back to this one, so the emergence of home banking, computer banking as it refers to it here. The first home banking service was offered to consumers in December 1980 by United American Bank. They were headquartered in Knoxville, Tennessee. They partnered with Radio Shack to produce a secure custom modem for its TRS-80 computer that allowed bank customers to access their account information securely. Services available in its first years included bill pay, account balance checks, and loan applications, as well as game access, budget and tax calculators, and daily newspapers. Now, here's the kicker, guys. This is the bit I love. Thousands of customers paid $25 to $30 per month for the service. Now, none of us would pay $25 to $30 per month for online banking today. We'd be infuriated if our banks tried to charge it to us. And remember, $25 to $30 today is a hell of a lot less than it was in the early 1980s. So these were seriously wealthy people who opted to pay this. Most people didn't have the internet at home back in them days. But moving on, large banks, many working on parallel tracks to United American, followed in 1981 when four of New York's major banks, Citibank, Chase Manhattan, Chemical Bank, and manufacturers Hanover, offered home banking services using the Videotex system. None of you will remember Videotex, I bet. I barely remember these things. But basically, what we're looking at is something where realistically, very, very few people obviously began using this in the 80s. It says thousands of people up there. A few other banks followed on. CCF Bank, now part of HSBC. Market share reached 19% by 1991. So by 1991, 19% of bank users used internet banking. And that's the bit I wanted to jump onto. So what we're looking at is 19% came on board in the first 10 years. Now, of course, not everyone by 1991 had the internet. I don't think I had the internet at home. I'd used the internet by 1991. We had it in school, but I don't think I had it at home at that point. I'd have been about 10 years old. We had a home computer by then, but it wasn't online. I think we probably moved online in about 1995 or something when the big boom. There becomes a tipping point with all this adoption. You see that it's slow, 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 slow. Then suddenly there's a huge tipping point and everyone's involved. And that's what I expect to happen with crypto as well. So I can scroll through this here. I'll do it quite fast. A couple of interesting points. By 2018, the number of digital banking users in the US reached approximately 61%. So we've gone from 19% in 91 to 61% by 2018. If you read through this, you can go back and pause the video and read through most of this. I'll scroll right down through it. But yeah, we're looking at a very, very quick turnaround and adoption. I remember I worked in mortgages back in, it would have been probably 2002 to 2005. My first job after university, I worked in mortgage on, basically centralized mortgage lending in the UK. And I remember at the time having a chat with a guy who was probably 10 years older than me, but still a youngish guy at the time. He'd have been in his early 30s. Somebody that had made an application had applied to us, and their bank was with a company called Intelligent Finance. And Intelligent Finance was the online only arm of the Halifax Building Society. And I remember him passing me the application, going, "Yeah, this guy, you give him a call. You're a bit younger than me, a bit more savvy. He thinks he's a smarty pants because he's got an online bank." That was his phrase. I always remember his terminology because at that time it was still unusual for people to have an online bank or an online only bank, and that was early 2000s. Moving on to this, by 2000, 80% of US banks offered e-banking. Customer use grew slowly. At Bank of America, for example, it took 10 years to acquire 2 million e-banking customers. However, a significant cultural change took place after the Y2K scare ended. I don't know if you guys remember the Y2K scare. Most of you, I think, are younger than me. I remember this. The whole world was scared to death that when the world turned, or when the millennium turned, all the computers were going to switch off. People cashed in bank accounts and spent all their money and went on world cruises and things, thinking the world was going to end, and actually nothing happened whatsoever. Go and read about it if you want to have a laugh. But going back to this, so I'll skip through it slowly so that you can pause the video and take a look. This just tells you about global adoption as time went by. But I want to jump onto this one. So this is just an article, Online Banking in 2006. This was written June 2006. And what we actually have here is the percentage of internet users who bank online. I don't know if you can see this quite clearly, but in 1996, it was marginally above 10%. In 1999, it was about 10%. In the year 2000, it was still, I'll give it about 15%, sorry, about 15, 17%. And then this is what I mean, that tipping point, and it doesn't happen overnight, but between 1996 We slow, then we have a bit of an acceleration up, and by 2004, this is in the US, it was just below 45%. So that's from what? From 2000, about 15, you've almost trebled the usage over 2000 to 2004. That's the kind of tipping point I mean. If we zoom that chart out, it would be a flat line from 1980 all the way through, or a very virtually flat line, a huge jump up, then a virtually flat line, a steady increase to now where we're talking about there being a lot more. This is a UK one. The fact that it's UK rather than the US is because I couldn't get the data at short notice for the US. But it works in a very, very similar way. The UK is slightly behind. By 2007, it was 32% of people using online banking. You can see that very, very quickly jumps up there to 86% by 2021, 2022. There was a bit of a spike there around 2020. I think that was people, a bit of a jump up from 80 to 86. That was the pandemic. If you looked into it in more detail, I can't tell you for certain, but I'm sure it was. That would be people that have been luggards in adopting things, in getting online, never bothered because they walked down to the branch and all of a sudden the branches are shut. So they had to jump online. And now 86%, it will increase. This is something that found. So key digital banking statistics. United States is projected to have approximately 216.8 million digital users by 2025. And worldwide, the number of digital banking users is anticipated to reach 3.6 billion by 2024. If you think 3.6 billion is about 40% of the global population, you think some of the global population doesn't actually have the internet yet. Of those who have the internet, that's going to be a high number, 95%, I bet. Maybe not quite, but it's a high number. Around 94% of users engaged in mobile banking access digital banking services at least on a monthly basis. So it's, again, you can skip through here and take a look. I'll let you pause the video and skip down and have a look at this. But the story is very, very simple. Internet banking began in 1981 or 1980. Think about that. I don't know if most of you listening are I get to see the stats on YouTube. You're younger than me. My audience tends to be between 20 to 45 years old. But most of you therefore are younger than me because I'm 43. And I remember getting my first online banking account. Most of you, well, you'll remember getting your first one, but it may have been your first bank account came with online banking. But it's my generation that remembers this coming in and sees this as something that's a new technology, if you like. This isn't dinosaur technology. My dad is in his 70s. He doesn't have internet banking. He doesn't. Never had it. He goes to the bank. He speaks to the lady behind the counter. He has an ATM card, but he goes to the bank. And this is a prediction going up to 2033. They predict that the global market size was valued at 12.87 billion in 2023. So let's assume that's about the same as today. And they forecast it to grow to 44.989 billion by 2033. So in 10 years, they're expecting it to almost quadruple. 12, 24, 36, 48. So let's say it's going to grow by 66, 70% in the next 10 years from where it is now. And we think it's an emerged technology now. We think it's something that is here. I don't think, like I say, my dad, he's an old guy. He doesn't need internet banking. I think he's in the minority, but clearly not. Clearly more people are yet to come online. And this is something that began in 1980. When did digital currencies begin? 2011, was it, Bitcoin? Something like that. I don't even know off the top of my head, but not long ago. We are in the very, 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 very early days. And that's the point I'm getting at. Those people who expect global adoption to come in imminently, this flip of the switch, as they like to call it, there will be a flip of the switch. But unfortunately, there will be several switches to be flipped before we see mass global adoption. The difference here, though, is that people are luggards. Everyday people like you and me, we take a long time. The internet was a great example of that. People began using the internet in the late 70s, I suppose, early 80s. It became very common, very popular by the late 90s. And then within about 5 years, it had gone from, I'm guessing, I'm making these numbers up, but about 10 to 20% of people, in my experience, had home internet, to almost everyone. Over, I would say, from about late 90s to mid 2000s, every home went from zero internet to almost everyone having it. You could look at the same for other technologies like cable TV or Sky TV, satellite TV, then digital TV, mobile phone, smartphone usage. You know, when I first got my mobile phone, my cell phone, it was literally a phone. I think it was a Nokia 3210, and it did have one game on it, which was that old Snakes game. If you never played it, it's great. You can still download it in the App Store. But realistically speaking, people went from using a home phone, using pay phones when they were out and about. I didn't have a mobile phone. I had no interest in one. Suddenly, all my friends were getting one. I got one. Then I didn't need a smartphone because I could send SMS and I could call people from my phone. It did everything I needed to do. Suddenly, everyone had a smartphone. You had to get one. That's what happens with all of these things. There's a tipping point. The retail tipping point is one thing that will take a long time. You won't ever get my dad trading Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, investing in any cryptocurrencies. You just won't. He's beyond that. Doesn't understand it, doesn't care for it. The next generations down might begin. Where this will tip for us from a retail point of view is with things like ETFs, when the pension companies get involved. So the retail tipping point is much, much closer. Um, but what we're waiting for is the utility tipping point. And the nice thing about the utility tipping point is it doesn't rely upon luggards like everyday people like you and I. The utility tipping point will come when the big banks realize that they will save themselves money and make bigger profits by using this technology. They can do things quicker, they can do it more automated, they can do it cheaper, they can let staff go. You know, you don't need 57 members of staff reading faxes from Swift anymore. I'm guessing at those numbers, by the way, guys. I'm guessing at the process. I don't work in the banks anymore. But realistically speaking, that's what it used to be. Faxes would come through from Swift and a human being would read it. They'd recognize the code and they'd input what that code meant onto the system. And that would take care of the transaction. So you got a fax from Swift saying David Jones has sent money to Paul Smith. And you'd go, okay, you'd key that in, you'd press the button, you'd press send, and then the money would physically leave David's bank account. And somebody at the other bank at the other end would be working for Mr. Smith and would physically receive that fax and apply that from their ledger into his account. That possibly still happens today, if I'm really honest. I don't know how automated it is now. I don't work in the banks anymore, but realistically speaking, that wasn't that long ago. That was in the last 20 years. So, you know, the utility side of things will go much, much quicker. I suspect the rails are already there in place. We know all these conversations that Ripple have been having with the big banks. They're not just conversations about will you use XRP or not. They're showing them exactly how this works. They're inputting, they're proving that it works. This is going to happen really, really quickly compared to the adoption of internet banking, because that was everyday people. Again, the best example there would be if you look at how quickly it took the big banks to offer internet banking to their clients, not for the laggards like us to jump on board, but to offer it. And if we look at that, you know, it went from 1980s odd. Where was that statistic we saw? It got to about 80% of banks offered it within about 15, 20 years, wasn't it? By 2000, 80% of US banks offered e-banking. So that's still 20 years. But the demand wasn't the same. By 2000, most people didn't have home internet. They were offering 80% of banks were offering it, and probably 80% of the people didn't have internet at home. So these things go in cycles when everything moves. It will be a lot quicker this time, but it won't be next Tuesday, is the point of this video. And if you're one of those people expecting it to be next Tuesday, you're going to be really disappointed. It's going to take time. The regulation isn't there yet, guys. Regulation is what's important now. Yes, we can confidently say Ripple have won that court case. They have. XRP in of itself is not a security. That's a huge, huge, huge first hurdle, but it's the first hurdle. The regulations aren't in place in the US. They are in place, or they're coming into place throughout Europe now, and the US will have to follow suit. The US is the biggest bully in the playground. I don't mean that derogatory. I just mean they are the biggest, toughest kid in the playground. But the simple fact of the matter is, if every other kid is doing something, even the big kid has to follow suit. You know, it works better, it works quicker if the big kid leads the way, like they did with the internet. But that's not the point. The simple fact of the matter is, the just because of the number of users in the US utilizing crypto, you are the forerunners of the retail world utilizing crypto. More Americans use it than most other places. I don't actually know if that's a guaranteed per capita, but more people use crypto than most other places on earth in America. And therefore, you are the forerunners when it comes to adoption from the population, but you're the luggards when it comes to the government regulating and allowing and making it easy for the banks to do. So there are hurdles to jump yet. Once those hurdles jump, oh, Bitcoin's just jumped to $64,000 as we're speaking. Good, good, good. That might be another little rally pushing forwards. XRP hasn't really, oh no, 58.87. That's gone up a chunk, hasn't it? Hopefully we'll see another little push now. But anyway, back to what I'm saying. The US needs to come on board. That regulation needs to happen. It's not an if they'll do it now, it's when. Regardless of which political party comes into power, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. It's got to happen. And once that does happen, things will move much more quickly. The big banks all are aware now that this is in their interest. No two ways about it. 3 years ago, all the big companies were telling you to stay clear of Bitcoin. All the big banks were saying it's a scam. Now they all want a piece of this pie. They're all buying it. They're all offering ETFs. It's happening. That train has left the station. But the train has left the station doesn't mean it's going to arrive at its destination by next week. It's a long journey. So my point today is enjoy this retail bull run. Love it. You're going to make real good money on this in the next 2 years, probably the next 9 months. Then we're going to see a bit of a dip again. It is only a retail bull run though. That switch will not be flipped until the regulation is here. That will happen much quicker now than it looked like it was going to happen a while back. You can thank Ripple for that, even if you're not an XRP fan. It's Ripple's hard work. It's all those people involved, not just Ripple. But you can thank them for that because this is something that they have achieved. But realistically speaking, it's happening, just maybe not as quickly as you think. You know, I think within 5 years, we're going to see utility in play. I think it's 15 years before we see before we see quadrillions of dollars worth of tokenization, before we see daily transaction volumes of hundreds of trillions of dollars. We aren't going to see that for a while yet. We might see $1 or $2 trillion transacted daily very soon. I actually ran a video that shows you approximately what I think the value of XRP will be if we see 1 trillion, 2 trillion, $10 trillion. I'm not going to jump into it now. I've been yapping on for far too long. I've done almost 30 minutes now, and I'm normally trying to keep it to 15. So I do apologize for that. But guys, the train has left the station. It's just a longer destination, perhaps. It's a longer journey to that destination, some of you might hope. We're going to get a retail bull run anyway. We're all going to make 3, 4, 5, 10x this time anyway. Probably even 20x on some coins. Probably 100x on some coins. But we're maybe not going to see those triple digits on XRP, in my opinion, in the next year or two. I think it's going to take more global utility adoption. Yeah, the switch has been flipped, but it isn't an instant. It's not a light switch, guys. It's the beginning of a movement that will take a while. But trust me on this. Hold fire. Keep buying while it's cheap. You will eventually be incredibly happy. Guys, I'm going to leave you to it. Thanks very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you took some value from it. It's coming. It's just might take a while. If you like what I said, please do like and subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Have a great week. Thanks again, Nick.